The moon blessing ceremony happened once every 10 years. It was the most sacred ritual in the Northern Kingdom, a night when the moon goddess herself was said to look down upon the pack and bestow her favor on those she deemed worthy. The grand hall of Shadowcrest Keep blazed with 1,000 candles, their light reflecting off silver decorations and white silk banners. The entire pack had gathered, alphas in their finest ceremonial robes, betas dressed in formal leathers. Even omegas wore their best clothing for this holiest of nights. Everyone except Nyla. She stood at the very back of the hall, as far from the dais as possible, wearing the same plain gray dress she wore every day. Not because she wanted to stand apart, but because no one had told her to dress differently. No one had told her anything, really. No one ever did. Because as far as the Shadowcrest pack was concerned, Neela barely existed. She was the orphan. The foundling. The Omega who'd been discovered as a crying infant at the pack's borders 20 years ago, wrapped in nothing but a torn blanket, with no scent of family, no mark of belonging. Nothing to say where she'd come from or who had abandoned her there. Some said she was cursed, that her parents had been rogues who died for their crimes, and their taint lived on in her blood. Others whispered she was the child of outcasts, wolves who'd committed such terrible sins that even speaking their names would bring bad luck. A few believed she was spawn of something worse, a demon, perhaps, or a witch's creation, left at the pack's borders to bring destruction from within. Whatever the truth, the pack had raised her out of duty, not love. They'd fed her scraps from the kitchen, housed her in a cramped room in the servants' quarters that barely fit a bed, and reminded her daily, through word and deed and cold silence, that she was here on sufferance, not by right. Neela had no friends, no family, no one who looked at her with warmth or kindness. She'd learned early to stay quiet, stay invisible, stay out of the way. She'd learned that hoping for more only led to heartbreak. So she'd stopped hoping, stopped dreaming, stopped believing she could ever be anything more than what they said she was. Cursed, tainted, unworthy. She shouldn't even be allowed in the ceremony. Nyla heard someone mutter nearby. Beta Marcus, one of the pack's senior warriors, his voice carrying despite his attempt at a whisper. An outcast Omega, with no lineage, no family, no worth. She'll bring bad luck to the entire ritual. The laws say all pack members must attend the moon blessing, his companion replied, one of the younger betas whose name Nyla didn't know. Even her, I suppose. Pack member. Marcus spat the words like they tasted foul. She's no more pack than a stray dog we feed out of pity. Less than even. At least a dog shows gratitude. His companion laughed. True enough. I heard she doesn't even wolf properly. Her shifts are stunted. Weak. Like her wolf knows she's not meant to exist. The words cut deep, as they always did, but Neela kept her expression blank. She was good at that. 20 years of practice had taught her how to hide the pain, how to keep her face neutral even when cruel words felt like claws raking across her heart. She kept her eyes down, her hands clasped in front of her, yet her shoulders slightly hunched, making herself as small and invisible as possible. If they couldn't see her, maybe they'd forget she was there. Maybe they'd stop talking about her like she was some cursed thing that had crawled from the darkness. At the front of the hall, on a raised dais of white marble, stood Alpha King Aldrich Shadowcrest. Even from this distance, Nyla could feel his presence, a weight in the air, a pressure that made her wolf want to submit, to bow, to acknowledge the absolute authority he carried. He was magnificent. Tall and broad-shouldered, with black hair that fell to his shoulders, and eyes the color of storm clouds, gray with flecks of silver that seemed to glow in the candlelight. He wore robes of black and silver, the ancient ceremonial garb of the Shadowcrest line, and around his neck hung the Alpha's chain, a massive collar of white gold set with moonstones. He looked like something out of the old stories. A king from the age of legends. Beside him stood his beta, Rowan, and his younger sister, Lady Cassia. Behind them, the pack's council of elders in their formal robes. "Let the ceremony begin," Aldrich's voice rang out, deep and commanding. The hall fell silent instantly. Servants emerged from the side doors carrying trays laden with crystal glasses, each one filled with pale silver wine that seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight. The moon wine, brewed once every 10 years from herbs that grew only during the lunar eclipse, blessed by the high priestess, and said to carry the moon goddess's favor. When you drank from the cup during the ceremony, if the moon goddess found you worthy, the wine would glow brighter, a visible sign of her blessing. Your glass would shine like captured starlight, marking you as favored. But if she found you unworthy, the wine would go dark. Or worse, it wouldn't react at all. A sign that you were nothing. No one. Unblessed. Nyla watched as the servants moved through the crowd, distributing glasses to every pack member. Alphas received theirs first, of course, then Betas, then the Omegas of good standing. Finally, reluctantly, a servant approached Neela. The woman, Marta, who worked in the kitchens and had never been cruel, but had never been kind either, held out a glass with a pinched expression, like she was offering something to a beggar. "Here," she said curtly. Nyla took the glass with trembling hands. "Thank you." Marta didn't respond. She just turned and walked away quickly, as if prolonged contact might taint her. Nyla looked down at the glass in her hands. The wine inside was beautiful. Pale silver, almost luminescent, swirling gently like liquid moonlight. She'd never held anything so precious before. "Let all who carry the moon's cup raise it high," Aldrich commanded from the dais. Around the hall, hundreds of arms rose, glasses lifted toward the vaulted ceiling, where an open skylight revealed the full moon above. Nyla raised hers too, though her arm shook. "Moon goddess," Aldrich intoned, his voice carrying the weight of ritual practiced for centuries. "Look upon your children. Bless those who are worthy. Show us who carries your favor." Silence fell, so complete that Nyla could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Then, slowly, the wine began to glow. It started with the alphas nearest the dais. Their glasses burst into brilliant light, the wine shining like molten silver, bright enough to hurt the eyes. Gasps of joy, murmurs of approval. The glow spread through the betas next, their wine lighting up with softer but still clear radiance. Then the Omegas, of good standing. Their glasses glowed too, perhaps less brightly than the Alphas, but still visible, still blessed. All around her, Neela watched glasses ignite with light. She looked down at her own cup. The wine sat there, pale and still, not glowing, not reacting, just nothing. Her stomach dropped. "No. Please, no." She waited, desperately hoping, or praying that maybe hers just needed more time. Maybe the goddess's blessing was slower to reach the back of the hall. But the seconds stretched into minutes, and her wine remained dark. Around her, people began to notice. "Look," someone whispered, loud enough to be heard, soft enough to pretend it wasn't meant to carry. "The foundling's cup. It's not glowing. Not even a flicker. The moon goddess rejected her." The whispers grew louder, multiplying like wolves circling wounded prey. Murmurs became open commentary. Commentary became mockery. "Of course it didn't glow," Beta Marcus said loudly, abandoning all pretense of discretion. "She's cursed. Everyone knows it. Bad blood. Rogue spawn." "Unblessed by the moon," someone else agreed, one of the elder Omegas who'd always looked at Neela with thinly veiled disgust. "Unworthy of the goddess's favor. Proof of what we've always known." "She shouldn't even be here," a third voice chimed in. Her presence probably tainted the entire ceremony. Neela's hands shook so hard the wine sloshed in her glass, dark liquid moving sluggishly, while all around her, blessed wine glowed like captured stars. She wanted to run, to flee, to disappear into the shadows where she belonged, where no one would see her shame. But the ritual wasn't over. No one could leave until the Alpha King dismissed them. She was trapped, caged by protocol and ancient law, forced to stand here while they tore her apart with words. "The Foundling's cup is empty," someone called out, one of the younger Alphas, a male named Theron, who'd always taken particular pleasure in reminding Nyla of her place. "Empty of the moon's light because she's empty of worth." Laughter rippled through the hall. Not kind laughter. Not the gentle humor of shared joy. This was cruel laughter. Jeering. The sound of a pack turning on one of its own, finding entertainment in another's humiliation. It echoed off the vaulted ceiling, seemed to come from everywhere at once, drowning Nyla in waves of mockery. Look at her standing there, holding that dark glass like it means something. Like she belongs here with the blessed. Nyla's eyes burned. She stared down at her unblessed cup, shame burning through her like acid, like poison spreading through her veins. She'd always known she was unwanted. Always known she was an outcast, tolerated but never accepted. But this public proof, this visible sign that even the goddess herself, or even the moon who blessed all wolves, found Nyla unworthy. It was too much. It was confirmation of every cruel word ever spoken to her. Every cold shoulder. Every dismissal. Every reminder that she didn't belong. The moon goddess, who blessed even the lowest Omega born to proper families, had looked at Nyla and turned away. "Look at her," another voice called, Lady Cassia, the Alpha King's younger sister, who'd never liked Nyla's presence in the keep. "Even the moon won't bless her." "Cursed," someone shouted. "Tainted." "Unworthy." "She brings shame to the pack." That was Beta Rowan, the Alpha King's second in command, his voice carrying authority that made others nod in agreement. The mockery grew louder, voices piling on top of each other, competing to see who could be cruelest. Some were shouting now, as if volume made their words more true. "The goddess speaks clearly. She has no place among us. Omega filth. Rogue spawn." Nyla's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Her throat closed up, tight and painful. Her chest ached like something inside was breaking. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But her hands were shaking so violently now that the glass nearly slipped from her fingers. The dark wine inside rippled and sloshed, mocking her with its emptiness. All around her, blessed glasses blazed with light. Beautiful, pure, proof of worth. And hers sat dark as a moonless night. Someone laughed, high and sharp and vicious. Someone else joined in, then another, until it felt like the entire hall was laughing at her. Hundreds of voices united in her humiliation, in the joy of watching her brought low, of seeing proof that she was exactly what they'd always said. Worthless, cursed, undeserving of love or belonging, or the moon's most basic blessing. Then a voice cut through the mockery, like a blade through silk. Silence. The single word, spoken in Alpha Command, slammed into the room like a physical force. Every voice cut off instantly. Every wolf in the hall went rigid, their instincts forcing submission to the absolute authority in that tone. Nyla's eyes snapped up. Alpha King Aldrich had risen from his throne. He stood at the edge of the dais, his storm-gray eyes blazing with something that might have been fury. The hall was so quiet now that Nyla could hear the candles crackling. "Who," Aldrich said, his voice dangerously soft, "gave you permission to mock during a sacred ceremony?" No one answered. The wolves who'd been jeering moments ago now stared at the floor, necks bowed in submission. Aldrich's gaze swept the hall, and when it passed over Nyla, she felt it like a physical touch, weight and heat, and something else she couldn't name. "This ritual," Aldrich continued, each word sharp and precise, "is meant to honor the moon goddess, not to shame her children." He stepped down from the dais, moving with the fluid grace of a born predator. The crowd parted before him like water, wolves stepping back to clear his path. He was walking toward the back of the hall. toward her. Nyla's breath caught. Her heart hammered so hard, she thought it might break her ribs. Why was he coming here? What had she done wrong? Well, Aldrich stopped directly in front of her. Up close, he was even more imposing. At least a foot taller than her, radiating power and authority that made her wolf whimper and want to bare her throat. His storm-gray eyes looked down at her, and for a moment Nayla saw something flicker in them. Recognition, maybe, or surprise. Your name, he said quietly. Neela, she stammered. Your Majesty. Neela. He said it like he was tasting the word. Show me your glass. With shaking hands, Nyla held up her cup. The wine inside still dark, still unblessed, proof of her unworthiness for all to see. Aldrich looked at it for a long moment, at the dark wine that branded her unworthy, at the proof of her supposed curse. Then he did something that made the entire hall gasp in collective shock, a sound like wind rushing through trees, or he took the glass from her hands. His fingers brushed hers as he lifted the cup from her trembling grasp, and even through her shame and fear, Nyla felt it. A spark of something, warmth that seemed to race up her arm and settle in her chest. Your Majesty, Beta Rowan started from the dais, his voice sharp with concern or confusion. What are you? Silence, Aldrich said again, though more gently this time, his tone making it clear this was not open for discussion. The hall had gone deathly quiet now. No more mockery, no more laughter. Just stunned, breathless silence as everyone tried to understand what they were witnessing. Aldrich held Nyla's dark glass in one hand, studying it with an expression she couldn't read, something between sorrow and anger and fierce determination. Then, with his other hand, or he reached up and took his own cup from where it sat on a silver tray carried by a nervous servant who'd frozen mid-step. The Alpha King's cup. Not a simple crystal glass like the others, but a goblet of pure gold, ancient and priceless, inlaid with moonstones that caught the candlelight. The ceremonial cup used by Shadowcrest Alpha Kings for 1,000 years. The wine inside didn't just glow. It blazed with light so brilliant it was almost blinding, bright as the full moon itself. The mark of the moon goddess's ultimate favor, the sign that her chosen Alpha carried her blessing in full measure. It was the most sacred object in the entire ceremony, and Aldrich was holding it out to her. He held both glasses, hers dark and shameful, his blazing with divine light, and looked down at Neela with those storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. The contrast was stark, brutal in its clarity. Her darkness and his light. Her unworthiness and his perfection. Proof of everything that separated them. The moon goddess, Aldrich said, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent hall with Alpha authority, does not make mistakes. Nyla stared at him, not understanding, her mind too full of shame and confusion to process what was happening. Why was he doing this? Why was he drawing more attention to her humiliation? Why? Aldrich lifted his golden cup, his blessed, sacred, glowing cup, and held it out to her with both hands, offering it like a gift, like something precious. Drink, he said softly, and his voice was gentle in a way she'd never heard from an Alpha, warm like summer sunlight breaking through winter clouds. I can't, Nyla's voice broke, came out as barely a whisper. She shook her head, tears finally escaping to track down her cheeks. That's yours, the Alpha's cup. I'm not allowed to, I'm not worthy. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she hated herself for it, for showing weakness, for crying in front of the entire pack. Drink, Aldrich repeated, and this time there was Alpha command in it, gentle but undeniable, an order that her wolf couldn't refuse even if she wanted to. With trembling hands that shook so badly she nearly dropped it twice, Neela took his golden cup. It was heavy, warm from his hands. The gold seemed to pulse beneath her fingers like it had a heartbeat of its own. The moment her skin made contact with the metal, something happened. The wine inside flared even brighter than before, the light exploding outward in a brilliant pulse that filled the entire hall with silver radiance. It was so bright that several wolves actually cried out, shielding their eyes. Nyla gasped as power rushed through her. Not painful, but overwhelming. Like standing in a warm ocean wave, like being embraced by something vast and ancient and impossibly gentle. And with that power came knowledge, understanding, certainty that settled into her bones like truth she'd always known but forgotten. Mate bond. The thought crashed through her mind with the force of revelation, of divine proclamation. Mate bond. Fated pair. True mates chosen by the moon herself before either of them were born. The empty glass hadn't been rejection. It had been preparation. The goddess had been saving her blessing, holding it back, waiting for this moment. For him. Nyla looked up at Aldrich in shock, her breath catching, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it thundering in her ears, and saw the same recognition burning in his storm-gray eyes, fierce and certain and blazing, with an emotion that made her knees weak. He'd known. He'd known from the moment he saw her. Maybe even before that. I felt it, Aldrich said quietly, just for her, though in the absolute silence of the hall everyone could hear. The moment you walked through those doors tonight. The bond. It nearly brought me to my knees. His hand came up to cup her face with infinite gentleness, his thumb brushing away one of her tears. Wow, I've been waiting, he continued, voice rough with emotion. 10 years as Alpha King, 20 years searching, my entire life waiting to find my mate. And you were here, all along. You were here. But I'm nobody, Nyla whispered, her voice breaking. I'm cursed. I'm unworthy. The goddess knew exactly what she was doing. Aldrich's voice was fierce now, protective, his hand on her face tightening slightly. She was saving you, protecting you, keeping you untouched by anyone else's claim because you were meant for me. He stepped closer, and Nyla could feel the heat of him, could smell his scent. Pine and winter, and something uniquely him that made her wolf want to roll over and show her belly, want to press close and never leave. Drink, he said again, and this time it was a plea, not a command. Please, and let me give you what they tried to deny you. Let me bless you the way you deserve. Nyla raised the golden cup to her lips and drank. The wine was sweet and cool and perfect, and as it touched her tongue, she felt power rush through her. The moon goddess's blessing finally, freely given. Not because she was worthy on her own, but because she was his. When she lowered the cup, hands still shaking, but heart somehow steady for the first time in her life, the entire hall was staring in stunned silence so complete she could hear her own breathing, her own heartbeat. Hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Hundreds of wolves watching, waiting. Aldrich took the golden cup back from her gently, then handed her the other glass, the one that had been dark and empty moments ago, the one that had branded her unworthy, back to her. His fingers brushed hers again as he transferred it, and this time Nyla felt the mate bond sing between them, warm and right and perfect. Now, Aldrich said, raising his voice so it carried to every corner of the grand hall, to every wolf who'd mocked her, to every person who'd called her cursed. Watch. He raised Nyla's glass, the one that had been dark and shameful, proof of her unworthiness, high above his head. And slowly, like dawn breaking after endless night, the wine inside began to glow. It started as the faintest shimmer, barely visible, then grew stronger, brighter, more brilliant. The light built and built, silver radiance pouring from the glass, until it shone just as brilliantly as any Alpha's cup in the hall. No, brighter. It blazed like a star, like captured moonlight, was like the goddess herself was looking down and proclaiming her blessing for all to see. Because it wasn't Nyla's cup anymore. It wasn't the unwanted foundling's rejected glass. It was the cup of the Alpha King's mate. The cup of the future Luna. And the moon goddess blessed her chosen with power that made the candles seem dim by comparison. Gasps echoed through the hall, rippling outward like stones thrown into still water. Someone actually cried out in shock. A high, startled sound. Beta Marcus stumbled backward, face gone pale. Lady Cassia's mouth fell open, her expression frozen between disbelief and something that might have been fear. The elder Omega who'd called Nyla tainted sank to her knees, head bowed. One by one, other wolves followed, dropping to their knees, bowing their heads, and submitting to the moon goddess's will made manifest. Aldrich lowered the now blazing glass and looked around at his pack, his expression hard as stone, cold as winter. When he spoke, his voice carried alpha command that made every wolf in the hall go rigid with instinctive obedience. "This Omega," he said, and there was steel in his words, danger barely leashed, "is my true mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself before either of us drew breath, fated to stand at my side as Luna." He paused, letting that sink in, letting them process what it meant. That every cruel word they'd spoken had been directed at their future Luna. That every laugh, every jeer, every mocking comment had been an insult to the moon goddess's chosen. The goddess did not reject her, Aldrich continued, his voice dropping lower, more dangerous. She was protecting her, saving her blessing for this moment. For me. He turned back to Nyla, and his expression transformed completely. The cold Alpha King melting away to reveal warmth and wonder and fierce, protective love that made her breath catch. "The goddess did not make a mistake," he said, loud enough for all to hear, but looking only at Nyla. "She knew exactly what she was doing. She was keeping you safe, keeping you untouched, keeping you perfect." His hand came up to cup her face again, and Nyla leaned into the touch without thinking, her body knowing what her mind was still trying to accept. This was real. He was real. This wasn't some cruel joke or fever dream. Nyla's eyes filled with tears, but not from shame this time. From relief. From joy. From overwhelming, impossible hope. Now Aldrich reached out and cupped her face with one large hand, his touch impossibly gentle. "I knew," he said quietly, "just for her. The moment you walked into this hall, I felt the bond snap into place. I've been waiting 20 years to find my mate, and you were here. All along." "But I'm nobody," Nyla whispered. "I'm cursed. You're mine," Aldrich said firmly. "You're my mate, my Luna, my equal in all things." He raised his voice so the whole hall could hear. Anyone who mocked her tonight mocked their future Luna. Anyone who called her unworthy called the moon goddess's choice unworthy. His eyes swept the crowd, and more than one wolf flinched under that gaze. "I suggest," Aldrich said coldly, "you all consider that very carefully." Then he turned back to Nyla, and his expression transformed, went warm and open, and so full of wonder that it stole her breath. "Will you accept me?" he asked quietly. "Will you be my mate? My Luna? My heart?" Nyla looked up at this powerful, magnificent Alpha King who'd just claimed her in front of his entire pack, who'd given her his own blessed cup, who'd silenced her mockers with a single word. And she thought about the empty glass that had branded her unworthy, and she thought about how that empty glass had led to this moment, had led to him. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Aldrich smiled, really smiled, broad and genuine and beautiful, and pulled her into his arms. The hall erupted, some in cheers, some in shocked whispers, but Nyla didn't care about any of them, because the Alpha King was holding her like she was something precious, and for the first time in her life, she felt blessed. Not by the wine. By him. 3 months later, the claiming ceremony took place under the full moon, in the same grand hall where Neela had once stood with an empty glass. But everything was different now. She wore robes of silver and white, the traditional garb of a Luna, with moonstones woven into her hair. Around her neck hung the Luna's chain, a collar of white gold to match Aldrich's, marking her as his equal, his partner, his mate. The entire pack had gathered again, but this time they didn't mock. They bowed. as Nyla walked down the center aisle toward where Aldrich waited on the dais. Every wolf she passed dropped to one knee, heads bowed in respect. Beta Marcus, who'd called her cursed, knelt with his forehead nearly touching the floor. Marta, who'd handed her the glass with such disdain, knelt with tears on her cheeks. All of them. Every single wolf who'd jeered and laughed and called her unworthy, kneeling. Nyla passed them all with her head high, not out of pride, not out of vengeance, but because Aldrich had taught her that she had nothing to be ashamed of, that she'd never been cursed. She'd been waiting. When she reached the dais, Aldrich took her hands, and the moon goddess's priestess began the ancient rite of claiming. As the priestess spoke the ritual words, as Aldrich placed his mark on Nyla's throat, and she placed hers on his, Nyla thought about that night 3 months ago, about the empty glass that had seemed like the ultimate humiliation, about how it had led to this, to love, to belonging, to finally being seen. I was wrong, Aldrich had told her later that first night, holding her in his arms, when I said the goddess was saving you for me. What do you mean? Nyla had asked. She was saving me for you. He'd kissed her forehead gently. I've been Alpha King for 10 years, powerful, respected, but hollow, empty, like that glass. He'd cupped her face in his hands. You filled me up, Nyla. You made me whole. You were never the one who needed blessing. His smile had been soft, wondering. You were the blessing. Now, as the priestess declared them bonded before the moon and the pack, as the crowd erupted in cheers, genuine this time, respectful, awed, Nyla looked at her mate and smiled. The glass had been empty, but her heart never would be again. 1 year later, epilogue. The moon blessing ceremony came around again, in as it did every 10 years, but this year was different. This year, Luna Nyla stood beside her mate on the dais, wearing her ceremonial robes and the Luna's chain, watching as the pack received their glasses of moon wine. She was heavily pregnant, 6 months along with their first child, and Aldrich kept one protective hand on her lower back at all times. Are you sure you want to be here? He'd asked her that morning. You could rest. No one would blame you. I want to be here, Nyla had replied firmly. I want to see it. So now she stood, watching as the servants distributed glasses to every pack member. And when the moment came, when Aldrich spoke the ritual words and called upon the moon goddess's blessing, Nyla watched the wine glow in every single glass, including hers. The goblet she held, no longer a simple crystal glass, but a golden cup to match Aldrich's, a Luna's cup, blazed with brilliant light. But she didn't need the glowing wine to know she was blessed anymore. She had her mate, her pack, her child on the way. She had everything. After the ceremony, as the pack celebrated and drank their blessed wine, a young Omega approached the dais nervously. She was perhaps 16, with downcast eyes and hunched shoulders that spoke of a lifetime of being overlooked. Luna, she said quietly, may I speak with you? Of course. Nyla smiled warmly and gestured for the girl to come closer. The young Omega climbed the dais steps and held out her glass with shaking hands. The wine inside was dark, unblessed. Everyone else's glowed, she whispered, tears in her eyes. But mine. Well, mine didn't. Does that mean I'm cursed? Unworthy? I don't understand. Nyla's heart ached with recognition. She looked at Aldrich, who nodded with understanding in his eyes. Then she took the girl's hands in hers, glass and all. Look at me, Nyla said gently. The girl raised her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. 10 years ago, Nyla said, I stood in the back of this very hall with a glass, just like that one. Dark, unblessed, and the pack mocked me, called me cursed, called me unworthy. The girl's eyes widened. You? But you're Luna? I wasn't Luna then. I was nobody, an outcast. And I believed them when they said I wasn't worthy of the moon's blessing. Nyla squeezed the girl's hands. But I was wrong. She glanced at Aldrich, who smiled at her with such love it still took her breath away. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, Neela continued. If your glass is dark, it's not because you're unworthy. It's because she has other plans for you. Special plans. She released one of the girl's hands and placed her palm over the young Omega's heart. The blessing isn't in the wine, it's in here. And one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 10 years, you'll understand why your glass was empty tonight. The girl stared at her, hope beginning to dawn in her eyes. Really? Really? Nyla smiled. I promise. The young Omega threw her arms around Nyla, hugging her tight. Thank you, Luna. Thank you. As the girl ran back to join the celebration, Aldrich pulled Nyla close, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. You're going to make a wonderful mother, he murmured against her hair. I had a good teacher, Nyla replied, thinking of how Aldrich had shown her what it meant to be valued, to be protected, to be loved. He'd offered his cup when hers was empty. And in doing so, he'd filled not just her glass, but her entire life with blessings she'd never imagined possible. The pack had mocked her empty glass. But the Alpha King had seen past the darkness to the light waiting beneath, and that had made all the difference.